everything's a little, I think everybody's just still in the waiting pattern for the comments, and so, you know, there's not a lot of action right now, but we'll continue to work on a few things, and we'll go through them today.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. All of you know me by now.
I would like to know who just signed on their phone, though.
Do I ask for 166?
Yes, who is on the line, phone number ending in 0568?
That's Molly Thurman with Hancock Farmland Services.
Thank you, Molly.
Hi, Molly, how you doing?
Hi, doing well. Hope everyone's doing the same.
Good, thanks.
So let me give you guys, you know, we usually start these calls, we try to give some updates on what's going on both at the sub-basin level as well as the GSA level. A couple of things on the sub-basin level, as many of you know, there's been the annual report that was submitted way back in April. There's an addendum to that. I think I may have told you last month that we thought that had been submitted, and it actually had not, but it has now been submitted, and that addendum then addressed the issue of the change in storage value that was reported in the annual report. And so as I've mentioned to this group a few times, that number we thought was incorrect. We had, you know, we pointed that out, and subsequently with some additional data supplied by the other GSAs, Tom Harder and his group went back and recalculated that. And again, this is for the year that's already passed, the water year that was the previous water year. The good news is that I think that they've also are going to incorporate that new process with that additional data from the GSAs into all future annual reports. And as I've mentioned a couple times, we'll have a lot more time to review these annual reports in the future than we have, and it's my hope that to actually be able to bring the annual report of the draft to the board and have that discussion at the board level as well. I'm not sure if we're going to have all the time to take it to both this committee and the board, but we'll certainly be able to take it to the board for sure. Stacy, did you have a question? It looked like you were going to raise your hand there for a second.
I think Jeff and I may have the same one, so I'll let him take this.
Okay.
Oh, really? Well, do you have a copy of what you sent, the addendum? Is that available, Amir, for us to look at?
It's actually being prepared by Four Creeks and Tom Harder, and so I believe they're going to upload it directly to the document that we reviewed was the final draft of it, but I think the final version of it will be uploaded to the Sigma portal. And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, Stacy and I at least are interested in reading it. So when will it be available to read by us general public type people?
I don't know if they've got it uploaded to the portal
Yes,
yet.
as of today.
I'll have to check on that and get it to you. So it would be available to everybody through any of the GSPs on the portal or the individual GSPs on the portal. And I think that they've done it, but I haven't looked, to be honest, to see if it's there. So I'll have to check on that.
The report we got yesterday from Eric Lemus had a couple of meetings yesterday for Pixley and Lower Tule, and the report we got there was that it hadn't been done yet. It was coming.
Yes, I think that's probably correct. When we had the Thule managers meeting, it had been prepared and they were going to upload it, but they didn't really give us a drop dead date that was going to happen. So it's likely it's going to be done here. I would assume very soon, though.
So Amir, can you give us a sneak peek? What's the combined change in storage for the Thule subbasin? So
I don't, you know, Jeff, I don't have the value in front of me. I don't have the copy of the document, but I will tell you it's around 100,000 acre feet change in storage, as opposed to the 1 million plus. 180. 180, yeah,
Yeah.
180, that's right, 180,
Something, yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Considerably revised from the previous value. I mean, 90% change. Yeah, I think, you know, Jeff, I think, I mentioned this maybe at the board meeting, at the previous board meeting, the significant change was some of the areas, that had limited data, and there was at least a couple data points that we thought were questionable and should be thrown out. And I think with that additional data set that they got, plus Tom agreed to revise some of the data or eliminate some of the data that was questionable, it probably is a lot more realistic value at about 180 acre feet of change in storage. That's not great, by the way. You know, it still shows that we have work to do as a subbasin as a whole, but it's probably a lot more realistic to what's happening across the subbasin. And as soon as we, you know, if we're able to get copies of that, the final document, we'll either A, let you know that's been uploaded, or B, try to get that out, because it certainly is a public document, isn't intended for public distribution. The other item that I was going to mention from the GSA managers, the sub-basin managers meeting, was that they are in the process now of looking at some of the data from the current water year, and that's a big plus for us, because that'll allow us to start to see that data in a more timely manner, and be able to evaluate that data much sooner. And so, as of yesterday, Fort Creek did send out some contour maps, and we're going to take a look at some of those and continue to have conversations with Fort Creek and see how that's doing, both across our GSA as well as across the entire subbasin. And as some of the projects and other things start to get implemented, whether, you know, wherever it is across the subbasin, we want to make sure that to see what kind of impact that might have on water levels. And I'm sure all of you are also interested in seeing what kind of water levels, you know, is going on with the, you know, with the drought conditions that we're having as well, and what kind of impact that might be having across, you know, with the reduction in the surface water supplies and things of that nature. So we're going to be keeping a closer eye, and all of that information, again, it's not public just yet, but it is something that we're going to at least be able to share some summaries with all of you in between now and the next annual report. The second item that I wanted to talk about a little bit at the sub-basin level is that there is a quarterly meeting held with DWR and the various sub-basin points of contact. And I was there actually representing Slurry Lake, which obviously covers Tri-County as well. So David DeGroot was there for the Thule side, but in that conversation with DWR, it's a very informal give and take. You know, it doesn't come with a lot of formal agendas or anything like that, but generally the idea is to ask questions of DWR and vice versa. They're obviously very interested in hearing the status of a lot of the GSP implementation, as well, and some of the issues that all of the GSAs are encountering, and the subbasins are encountering. The key item that probably came out of that discussion with DWR is, again, their commitment to having the comments on the GSP completed by January of 2022. And then, you know, they've said that numerous times, but I think the issue that probably came out that's most important is the fact that they expect that your responses to these comments are actual addendums to your report, to your GSP document. So what we're looking at is however we end up responding to DWR, that's actually going to be viewed as an addendum to our report. key to that is that, you know, that's going to be held as commitments made by us back to DWR as part of the GSP implementation. It does allow us some flexibility, I think, in terms of being able to update some of the information that may be in the document. It also allows us to maybe add some additional information and add maybe additional projects, things of that nature that we think might be relevant. Again, I'm talking about at a sub-basin level, not just the Tri-County GSA. It does require, though, that we go through board approval again of that, because it will be viewed as an addendum to the actual GSP document.
Full amendment.
A full amendment to the document. I asked the obvious question, which I'm sure many of you are thinking, which is, you know, in the Tule subbasin, we have 6 different GSPs, and a comment. So their plan is to issue one set of comments for the entire subbasin. So if we had a comment, for example, on a broad brush issue like subsidence, that's going to affect multiple GSP documents. And are we looking at having to submit each one of those separately with the same change in it and the same information, you know, that same response? And then the obvious thing too is that if my response is slightly different than Lower Tule's response, which one governs and all those kinds of things. And frankly, DWR's response to that was, that's our problem to work out. And they basically said, you guys need to figure out how you're going to do that. You know, they of course are expecting the subbasins to be these monolithic, unified responses that everything, you know, works out perfectly and we're all going to respond exactly the same way. I think they are a little bit more realistic. I'm being facetious, of course, but they did basically say that that's up to us. They play yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious who at DWR was that meeting with?
So, good question, David. Good question. That was with Craig Altair and some of his staff, and then Paul Gosling, who is the new deputy director for Sigma.
Right.
Paul stopped in for a bit too, and he wasn't able to be there for the entire meeting, but Paul dropped in and I think I mentioned this to the group. We were actually Paul was our client when we were doing the work for Butte County that was underway before he took this current position. So he's he was very interested. He made sure to go around the room to hear what each of the subbasins were doing on Sigma implementation, and that was a big part of what he was very much interested in hearing. And so I think having him on, having Paul on the call was great. It was
I find Paul to be really good and very responsive. I have a question. Craig Altair has been down there in person. Did he make any comments or reference to the fact that, what he's witnessed and seen down there?
Not directly, David. I mean, he didn't talk about it directly, but I think he, alluded to the fact that he's been very active and that, he's been very interested in what's going on in this area in particular. So I should mention that it pretty much the entire South Valley, starting from the probably Modesto South, most of those subbasins were represented by somebody on the call, all the way down to Kern.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it, Amir.
Sure.
I'm going back on mute.
Okay. So I think, like I said, I think the key issue here is that our response to those comments is going to be considered an addendum to the plan, and then we just need to plan or prepare accordingly, I should say, to how we're going to prepare our responses and work with the other GSAs in both Flurry Lake and the Tule, which is sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge in both of those subbasins. So that's pretty much things at a subbasin level. From a Tri-County update, I think we're going to cover most of that on the DMS and some of these other items that you see down here. So I won't go through both of them. I'll let you. We'll cover that on item number 3. Is there any questions or any comments, anything that I can clarify or answer for anybody before I move on? Oh, we're good. Okay. Yes, I like it. So I think most of you are aware of Brian Platt, who's with DWR, is our new DWR rep for this area. And Brian's on the call with us. And Brian, I want to ask you if there was anything else that you wanted to add to the group before we move on to the next topic here.
Hey, yeah, thank you for opportunity to provide input. I don't really have anything to add. We're still hearing the same thing on our side that you've been hearing about the timeline to get you feedback. And yeah, so thank you, but I don't really have anything to add. Okay, great.
Brian, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'll probably just call out to you on these meetings just so that if you have an opportunity or if there is something you want to add, you'll have an opportunity to do that.
Awesome, thank you.
And if anyone does have any questions for you as well. Ren, do you want to update us a little bit on that Lower Deer Creek watershed plan?
Yeah, of course. Actually, can I share? You guys caught me in the field last time. Can I share a quick map to bring people up to speed? Is that possible?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure.
You can see where we're talking about here.
Okay, now
There you go.
All right. Cool. Just quick check. Can people see this okay?
Yes, great.
Awesome. All right. So just as a quick refresher, we're currently continuing on with the PL 566 planning effort through NRCS. This broader planning effort is encompassed by this, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this red, sort of this red watershed boundary. And then I threw up these GSA boundaries within the broader watershed boundary so folks can kind of orient themselves. The intent of the project was initially to develop regional access to a set of NRCS funding pools through this PL 566 money. In order to be eligible or to accelerate this process, this watershed plan was sort of meant as a mechanism to identify water conservation and quality protection objectives, soil protection and prospective habitat restoration and protection actions that could occur within this broader watershed. And so the objective is to develop this planning document, get it adopted by NRCS, which would make the region viable or accessible to these ancillary 566 funds. I think we're all kind of in agreement that we could use as much financial assistance help over the coming 20 to 30 years as possible, and having these NRCS funds to nest against state funds could be the ticket to being actionable in the area. As a quick update, we anticipate that this plan will be out by the end of the year. We're hoping to have NRCS adopt it within the next couple of months. One hurdle that we're currently, or two hurdles that we're currently clearing are around Section 7, so Endangered Species Act compliance, which is ironic because a lot of these are habitat restoration efforts within the watershed. And then additionally, cultural resources compliance. So as we develop this plan, we're needing to hone in on what our restoration and retirement and recharge projects are going to look like in order to clear those hurdles. I'll provide more updates once we get those things nailed down. And then I'm going to stop sharing here. Just one more final update. As a point of clarity, there are two actions happening concurrently associated with this watershed plan. The first is the implementation and submission of the watershed plan to NRCS. And then there's my position, which is the Department of Conservation funded watershed coordinator position, which is partly to implement the watershed plan. My efforts aren't as far as habitat restoration, recharge, community water securement. Those efforts, although focused in this watershed, are not confined to the red line, right? So we have two different sets of rules. We have like the priority red line area that will have the ancillary NRCS support, and then we can still operate within the broader basin or sub basin. So yeah, if there's any questions, now's a really good time since we're in this overview discussion. Otherwise, I'll just keep updated.
Well, can I ask a question?
Shoot.
Yeah, Red, that map was really helpful. Been hearing about it for a long time, but I've never actually seen the map. What was the definition of the outline? I mean, you know, that doesn't look like a border of anything, but how was that red line determined? You're on mute, Ren.
Ren, we lost you.
He's on mute.
And that's all I have to say about that. So that's just the weird looking line as a watershed boundary, right? So you have like you have like the Huck 10, Huck 18 or 8 bound. You have basically those different resolutions of watershed boundaries. This is, I wouldn't say arbitrarily scaled, but the team that was collaborating on, including Kathy on this call on the development of the project, needed a scope, a size, a geography that was going to be addressable through to NRCS, but wasn't so big where it just lost all of its applicability, right? So that's why it looks kind of squiggly.
Okay, I don't want to belabor the point, but I mean, it doesn't look like a line. I mean, it would take you know, the title and a title company a long time to do a legal description of that line. Is that a legal, or was it somebody, you know, drawing on a map, kind of like what it looks like you did? Or
That's
is
a
it?
good question. So once this associated with the plan will be a packet of prioritization areas. Those prioritization areas, whether it's for habitat or prospective recharge within that line, will be parcels, right? So you see like an APN parcel map, and then you can kind of, in some regard, toss away the boundary line and operate on a parcel by parcel basis, which would be more tenable for those thinking in those regards, which would be easier to describe.
But for purposes of your NRCS grant, you basically drew a line on a map. I mean, is that how that came to be?
I wouldn't say no. I would say no. It's a predetermined watershed boundary, right? So, I mean, the 566 funds are meant to address watersheds. So using like either a broader watershed or a sub watershed is the easiest way to find those pools.
Hey, Ren,
Yes.
This is Kathy. If I could just add quickly, Dan Vink drew the line under the PL 566. Since I was involved in it for about 2 years, we're limited to 250,000 acres. So it's a small watershed program. So the line is a little bit arbitrary, but as Ren, as you were saying, we'll be looking at the APNs. It does end at the boundary, the western boundary of the Tule subbasin. So we thought about increasing it, but that would add a lot to developing the watershed. There is a potential, I think, Ren, one of the things in the watershed coordinator is to look at other PL 566 watershed potential grants in the area. So, but that's kind of how it came about way back when. So
the line on the western edge is somewhat arbitrary, right? As a point of clarity, the other two lines, the squiggly lines, are not like a Sharpie and a whiteboard, right?
Jim, this is Deanna. I have another question on the map. I noticed that the Deer Creek notation on the map, it ended quite short of where Deer Creek channelized. Deer Creek's channelized to, at least to the homeland. So I don't know why the Deer Creek shows it kind of ends quite a ways back there in Pixley.
So this isn't an official map. This is a GIS. This is a working map on my PC. So that just happens to be a function. You can see all these working layers. That just happens to be a function of the, so you can see it more clearly with this particular, let's use this.
The entire boundary is just in Tulare County.
Yeah, so do consider that that this map is a working map. This isn't off of the document. This is me pulling up GIS file while we're talking.
Gotcha, no problem.
Yeah, Ren, just for whatever it's worth, I think this map is just a tremendous tool for you to use as you go out and educate folks on what's available. So the more detail and explanation you can put around this map, the more helpful it is to kind of get the idea of what this is all about.
Yeah, I could talk about this for too long, but just to kind of wrap this thing into a point of future conversation, one of the primary objectives for this project is to streamline and develop prescriptions on how we're going to treat this landscape. And so that includes permitting. And largely, there is some amount of vagueness as far as like if a landowner was to prospectively go into a land fallowing and restoration program, what, for example, the endangered species mitigation measures, or if any, or avoidance measures might need to be. And so that's one of the reasons I've kind of held off on doing a whole lot of I hate to use the word salesmanship, but putting this thing forward, because I really want to make sure that we understand what actions are truly entailed before getting people really excited or under excited or whatever it might be. We want to have an accurate representation of what NRCS is going to accept. Cool.
I will note something we've run into on habitat projects a ton is landowner protections and also neighboring landowner protections. And so I think it's wise to figure out, under the program you're working with, what those look like and what they can't look like, because it's a big hinge point.
Yeah, you're speaking right to my soul. So as a restoration ecologist, most of these efforts are conservation measures, and you're totally right. There's been some back and forth with NRCS. I'm pretty optimistic that in the long term, we'll be able to pursue some sort of landscape safe harbor avoidance measures prescriptions that we can adopt as a region in these actions. But I don't think they're going to be ready by the time this document's out. So
yeah. And I just for some information, I know that there's some effort with CDFW and WCB, which are state level, to do something like that. And those two agencies have been pretty hesitant about landscape scale. So it'd be interesting to see how the federal and the state can kind of work together on something like that.
Right. Brent, thank you very much. That was, I think, I agree with what Jeff said, that this was very helpful seeing that map. Yeah, that was good. And in fact, that's going to be a nice little segue to our item number C on section 3 here of the, so we're going to kind of touch upon some of those same issues in that as well. All right, let's talk a little bit about the implementation. So this is kind of our Tri-County update as well. Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about how the DMS, the basin safe?
So we're still working with Four Creeks to implement our data management system and to change or tweak any problems we might have. It is available. I think all of you on the call have seen it. We were able to get our second quarter invoices out, and we're working on, just so you know, we're working on incorporating outstanding previous accounts receivables into the new invoicing system, so that hopefully we'll have one clean invoice moving forward for some of growers that have been getting two separate invoices. So we're working on that. We did run into this morning, I reviewed the website and I noticed that the ET values for June were not listed this morning, and they should be on there. So, and Bays and Safe is working on that. We have our weekly call with them tomorrow, and I hope to have that corrected. Although the data is in there, it's just not viewable right now, because it was in there, it was used for second quarter invoicing, but for some reason was not viewable to clients and customers this morning. So there's just little glitches. We're working through them. If anybody is looking at their landowner website and has a question, please call us, and we'll try to get any clarification or help you with anything necessary on the website. And I think that's about it for data management.
Okay, great. On the water accounting policy, I wanted to just some quick updates for that. In our last conversation, we had talked about how the different stakeholders might want to, the landowners might want to receive their sustainable yield allotment, whether that was going to be on an annual basis or in a 5-year block. And so we are still asking that for the landowners to maybe, give that idea some more thought, let us know what your preference is, reach out directly to Deanna and let her know what you're thinking on that and how you would like to see if the way it's done now is the 5 years, it's allocated in 5 years, but if you'd like to see that change in the policy to an annual, for whatever reason that might work best for your operations, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, the time is kind of ticking on making that change, and I haven't heard any strong reaction from any of the growers on this subject. So without some input from the growers, I imagine we're not going to address it at the board level. So it would stay the same. It would stay at the 5-year block. And so if there's a desire to see that change, we'd have to come pretty quickly, because by the end of the year, it would be too difficult to unwind at that point. So even the November board meeting would be pushing the timeline a bit far. So if a landowner would really like to see that block change to a yearly, probably want to hear from them pretty quickly. So it doesn't have to be on the call today, but probably in the next couple days, we're going to be sending out on Monday the agenda for the board meeting next week. So, but again, I mean, it is, there's nothing wrong with the 5-year block particularly. It just was, and I'll back up a little bit and just reiterate what I did at the last meeting. And the only consideration really would be that this year is the only year that all water is at $10 per acre foot. Next year, the civil penalties will be incurred, and there is a priority of use, which says that sustainable yield will be used before you move into your transitional water. So if you were to go into your second or third year of sustainable yield in this year, that water at the $10 or the less charge would not be available to you. You'd have less of the lower charged water available to a landowner. It might be so minute, it's not even worth the discussion. You would have to look at your own account and make a value choice on that. But that was really the reason for bringing it up to the group. I just didn't want anybody to feel like we had, done that and it was some sort of bait and switch to get you to pay higher fees next year. That really was not the intent. And so whenever we come across something that looks wonky, we wanted to give an opportunity to address it. So, but again, if everybody's comfortable, then the 5-year block will remain and we'll just move forward.
Okay. So please, for those of you that do have some thoughts or ideas or, concerns, comments, whatever, get a hold of Deanna and let's pass them along. The water trading policy and water trading at a basin level, that's been an ongoing discussion here at this group. I know several of you have expressed, your thoughts about it's hard to come up with a good policy if each GSA is doing something and shouldn't that be done at a basin-wide. So right now, based on some of the discussions at the basin level between the GSAs, this isn't meant to be a slam or anything, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of interest in having a basin-wide trading market, a single policy structure just at this time. Trying to pick my words carefully because I don't want to make it sound like that everyone's opposed to it. They're all open to the idea of inter-GSA trade as long as it stays within the sub-basin. But trying to come up with one set of rules or one set of policies, that doesn't appear that there's a lot of interest in that right now. That may change as we get more and more into and these trades start to happen and people start to come up with some of the, encounter some of the difficulties in some of these trades, or they're maybe not as convenient as they should be. And as Four Creeks continues to update the Basin Safe program, they are trying to build in a module that is meant for trading. Not quite done just yet, so we're still tracking things more manually. But I think as some of these start to come into play, it is very likely that there may be more of an interest in having a more unified policy. Maybe it's not just one, but we start to have some of these things start to come together to facilitate and improve, how we're doing these inter GSA trades. I know that's probably not the answer that most of you wanted to hear, but that is what we're working with right now. Stacy, you have a question?
Has Tri-County started working on its own individual policy? I know that Lower Tule, Pixley, and Eastern Tule all have policies in place at their own GSA level. So I'm just curious if there's been any work at a Tri-County level to get one going.
Yes, I have been working on it, and when you look at those policies, that's one of the things that's kind of concerning. They're very different, right? Eastern Tule's is pretty open and available, and then you go back and Pixley's is a little more prescribed on what can happen. So I'm looking at those. If there was a project or landowners that wanted to put a policy or wanted to make a trade happen between between the GSAs, it might help to move that along a little bit. But it's not off the table. We are working on it. I just didn't want to put something else back out there until it was a little bit more developed. So still working on it is the best way to.
Yeah, if we were just trading within Tri-County, I think that policy would be fairly straightforward and relatively easy to prepare. But we are trying to make sure that as much as we can, that the Tri-County policy allows you to trade with the other GSAs within the sub-basin, and we try to make that as convenient as possible. The biggest sticking point, of course, is that we are tracking water use and water consumption differently than some of the other GSAs, and we knew that going in, and we thought this would be a better way of doing it and a little bit more realistic to the kind of growers and water demand that we have in Tri-County.
Yeah, and even with that, we would still only be 4 of the 6 that are even engaged in possible intra-basin trading, right? So there's 2 GSAs in the Tule sub-basin that are not participating in that thus far. So we are working on it, and within Tri-County, the ability to trade your sustainable yield or to move your sustainable yield between accounts within Tri-County is available. That's not hindered in any way. It's just the intrabasin, trade that we're still developing the policy on.
So I will mention, this is something that's not on the agenda, but I will mention that on this Friday, the 27th, the Bureau of Reclamation is doing a webinar for their Water Smart grants. And those grants have been used, that's the one that Kauai, for example, the Kauai Subbasin that most of you are familiar, has their water market study going on. In addition to that, some of this water or this money can be used for water meters as well. And so it is our intention to participate as part of that webinar and look for funding opportunities. One of the things that we've talked about, loosely is, maybe approaching Four Creeks and others, the other GSA managers, and seeing if they want to try and come up with something similar to what Kauai did and go after some of this water market money and see if we can maybe use it to come up with a more basin-wide value or basin-wide rules, I should say. So that's still up for debate. The grant, don't quote me on this, but I believe they're due in October. So we have to make some decisions fairly quickly if we're going to chase this money. Separate from that, Tri-County is looking at that money ourselves and trying to see how it might work best for us. Our nexus to the Bureau, of course, would be through the Angelo Water District. So there is some connection there that we would have, and we'd have to, figure out what's going to be the best way to represent that in the grant application.
Mayor, would that grant be for the Tule or Tulare Lake subbasin? Because they're subbasin level.
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's probably more likely going to be for Tule, but we are looking at it for both subbasins as well and trying to figure out what's going to be the best projects to submit on an application. All right. You know what? Before we jump into the land repurposing, which I think is going to be the remainder of our call this morning, David, I wanted to ask you if you had anything at all that you wanted to share. I didn't give you an opportunity to give any updates to the group, or if there was anything from a legislative standpoint that you thought might be of interest to this group before we jump into this land repurposing. And you're on mute too. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, not too much that you aren't already aware of. The one observation I will make is that I think Paul Gosselin has been really a good addition to TWR. And I have found him to be really accessible, and he follows through on things. So that's a very good sign with all the pressure there is on BWR relative to getting these basin projects done and the GSA plans, etc. Everything right now is kind of watching what's going on with this recall election. There's just so much focus up there on that, and then on the drought. So there's no new news to any of you. I mean, that's just really taking an awful lot of effort in Sacramento at this point. And so we are staying right on top of it and monitoring is basically almost all those agencies through various different partners because of the pressure that's on them right now, particularly with drought and working with all the issues that are, the demands that are coming from different parts of the state on them. There is renewed interest, and I think the feds are getting much more involved. We had a conversation with Congressman Costa recently about the Sites Reservoir, and I think that they're looking at trying to see how they can accelerate that. They're also looking at a couple of other storage facilities that have been on the books for a while. And Costa did talk, about the Friant Canal. We had that call with him last week, and we did have a brief call with the governor last Thursday. But he basically kind of kept it to some generalities, but keenly aware of issues that we brought up with him down here. So.
Great. Thank you, David. All right, so the land repurposing policy, and I wanted to kind of maybe, talk a little bit about why we're talking about this now first, and why we kind of jumped to this. It might have been a little bit, we kind of mentioned it previously, but there was a sense that with, and again, it's going to depend on how the recall and everything else works out, but there was a sense that there was going to be some money made available through the current budget, and DWR would have some additional funds, and there's some legislative efforts put together to make to have a land repurposing program available. And so Deanna and I talked a little bit about this, and we thought, hey, this is potentially a lot of money, potentially from this grant program that could be coming up at the state level, and it put a little bit more of a sense of urgency on our part to say, let's maybe get ahead of this a little bit. Let's start to at least get people thinking about this, just get our initial thoughts together. Let's see as a group that we can kind of decide on some basic items. So I sat down and I, Stacey Ann was, sent me the paper there from EDF, and I looked at the current language that's in AB 252, which is the legislation that was going to authorize the program. It has not passed. I want to be clear. It is, it's very much still in the process, and has already gone through some changes. But I took a look at what the initial, or at least the current draft document looks like, and I put together this document, and really the idea behind this was to kind of get some discussion going today, try to get some input from this group on some of the things that we can define. For example, when we actually say land purposing, what are we actually talking about? How would we define that? How would we as a group define a project that would be eligible? We have a lot of different opportunities here in Tri-County. The simple fact of the matter is that, as Deanna mentioned earlier, we're paying these civil penalties, which you are all, many people on this call are very much aware of. And part of that decision by Tri-County is to decide how we're going to utilize that money. And a program that is, that potentially is funded either through some grant money or through the civil penalty money in part, we would then decide, hey, how do we want to best utilize that? So that's kind of the overall gist. This is by very much, as you all know, a working document. We barely started to scratch the surface. There's a lot more detail that would have to go into a program like this. But we wanted to at least get the ball rolling. We wanted to get some input from this group. I'm hoping, I know that all of you just got this yesterday and barely have had any opportunity to review it at all. So I'm going to take a little bit of time here, just kind of walk everybody through this document as it currently stands. And then at different points, I'm going to, if you have comments or ideas or thoughts or you just like say, I hate this, let me know that too, because we are, as we're going to be working on this over the next few months. very much bringing more, bringing this document, the program back to this group and trying to get as much input as we can. So, as we kind of talked about in the introduction, we really did this because we see this as a potential, funding opportunities that are coming up. SGMA does allow the GSAs to establish a program for voluntary fallowing or validate an existing fallowing program as well. So it does, it has some language in there that's specific to land fallowing. Again, we're calling this a repurposing program. Fallowing is the language that's used within SGMA.
Following was the language when SGMA was drafted, but
Right.
I think that in the rethinking that as they've moved forward, they've reimagined what that word should be, and I
Right.
think land repurposing
Right.
makes a lot more sense than just fallowing and leaving land not utilized in its best in the best way. So it's a smarter term, I think, and it would be the goal is to if land comes out of production, to do something of value with it.
Right. Right. I think that's an underlying theme of this program. So as we move on, I'm not going to read the entire document to you, but as I understand, but I am going to just point out a few key things. As far as this document is concerned, we defined land repurposing as any activity that public or private entity takes to reduce groundwater use and provide other benefits to the environment or broader community by repurposing current or former irrigated agricultural land. So there's a couple of key things in there. The public and private entities allow for a wide variety. It can be projects either done at a district level or GSA level, or it can be a private entity, it can be an NGO. We wanted to make it broad enough that those would all be covered. And that the second part of that sentence does talk about making sure that, not only we talk about groundwater reduction and groundwater demand, reduction in groundwater demand, but we want to have it as multi-beneficial projects as we can. There should be multi-benefits to every project. And that we want to try and look at those types of projects and saying, okay, we're reducing groundwater demand, but we're also going to then provide these other benefits. All these projects should have that. And then I think the other key part of that was the repurposing of the current and former irrigated agricultural land. And I went back and forth as we were kind of writing this. And this is one where I'd like to get some input from the group in particular. But we are giving transitional water credit to former irrigated lands. And I thought if we're doing that and we're actually going to reduce groundwater demand, then those lands should also be included in any of the repurposing programs and be eligible for funding opportunities and things of that nature. And I guess I wanted to open that up a little bit and ask this group what you guys thought about that as a definition for land repurposing, and if you had any thoughts on that.
Mayor, it's Mo.
I will.
As a definition, I'm okay with that. As a overall solution, I don't personally see how land repurposing or fallowing is going to achieve the end goal that we need to achieve. Because at 0.34, it's 3 acres to get 1 acre foot of water. And the cost associated with that, even at $1,500 an acre, considering you're going to buy fallow ground really cheap, is $4,500 an acre foot, which gets to be very expensive water. And even with penalty monies and so forth that we're all talking about, I don't see the logic, the financial logic in this solution. So I know I sound like a broken record, but I'm looking for other projects that we can, look into, even if they're expensive or crazy or whatever. And then we can go get grant monies and so forth. But I just wanted to put that thought out there, and as we move forward. Thanks.
Yeah, Mo, I agree. This is not the solution by itself, but it is part of a larger, tool set. And I agree. I know what you're thinking, that, hey, we're not talking about projects. And it is the next item on our agenda, and we are open to any and all projects. So this is just meant to be one of the tools. And like I said, the sense of urgency right now and moving forward with this is that we know for sure that, or very likely we know that there's going to be some significant amount of grant money available. And these types of projects take some time to develop. So I think the idea here is to move everything on a parallel path between the water market, other projects as you alluded to, and then this land repurposing as well. Some of the projects are going to affect both of these things. For example, if you try to do a project outside of Tri-County, you're going to want to know how you're going to get credit for that. And if it's a land repurposing project outside of or within Tri-County, you want to know how you're going to get credit for that as well. And so I think we're just going to try and move everything along in a parallel path. But I appreciate that comment, Mo. I agree with you. It's got to be something. We've got to get aggressive on projects as well. If that's the direction that this group wants to go.
Yeah, no, the land repurposing program would just be a puzzle piece to the overall puzzle, and really the desire is to get enough of a framework to put it on the website to create eligibility for the funding that I think is going to become available, as well as take advantage of some of the collaboration and partnerships that I think we're going to have with the Lower Deer Creek watershed and other habitat restoration projects that fit within the framework. Even the Allensworth project has a component of habitat to it and different things, and so we just want to use it as a puzzle piece, not the overall objective for Tri-County Water Authority. Just one of the pieces.
Okay, thank you.
Like I said, it's not my intention to go through and read this entire document, but I do want to point out, as you guys are thinking about this, and as you get the next few weeks to read over this, there are some certain things I just do want to point out. We do want to make sure that this program and any benefits that are derived from this program work in combination and coordination with the existing agriculture production, so that I think, Stacey Ann, I think you alluded to the fact that it also affects the neighboring landowners, right? And if we're taking land out of production and repurposing land, the field across the street and next door is still going to be in production, and whatever is occurring here has to be compatible with that, and not cause some other negative impacts or other impacts to that existing. So we want to make sure that that's taken into account.
Yeah, and Amir, there's some language in the California Fish and Game Code, I don't know the section off the top of my head, that talks about impacts to neighboring landowners for repurposing that includes habitat, that may be helpful to include just at the outset of the policy, so that landowners who may be concerned about that are informed of the existing policy that is there for their protection, not necessarily their protection, but just is there for them.
Yeah, we do want to make sure that that is a very strong consideration on and is built into this policy.
On the time frame issue, that you brought up, and I appreciate that you put in here, Sigma did validate previous following programs.
Mhm.
And so I think the time frame should be fairly generous, because there's quite a bit of land in Tri-County that is fallowed.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to make it ineligible if something made sense on the overall landscape, so.
Yeah, so that, there is so much land in Tri-County that is already fallowed, and so how much more, what's the total value of the groundwater reduction we can get out of that? We wanted to take that into account, and exactly what you just said, Dan, about, we want to be able to incorporate those lands into any projects as well. I'd hate to not be able to do a project just because we said, oh, well, you're already fouled, so you could,
Right.
We can't include that property into a potential program and potential project. So that's
Just
what
a
we were
caution
kind of,
on that, there may be some limits on some of the funding sources, though, for including lands that are already fallow. There's been talk, especially as it pertains to AB 252, of limiting it to only lands that would be fallowed just as a result of a program. So just something to think.
Yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to point that out, that I included that language in this document. And that's been the ongoing debate that we've been kind of having is, if we include that, does it start to impact our, potential funding out of this program, out of the 252 monies and things of that nature. So,
if it's worded right, it should
Yeah.
enhance it, because there's too many potential projects from a spot that could sink a better geographical reservoir location, and these things would actually enhance capabilities, so you don't want to limit your geography.
I agree, Mark, I agree with you. And ultimately, that was a decision to keep that language in here, but as we go through this and continue to have these discussions with this group, I want to make sure that we're, keeping that in mind. Those are some of the key decisions that we're going to have to make as a group together.
Yeah. Being the program wider, I would assume that the funding that comes available would be available through grant funding, so you would write your grant proposal to match whatever scope it is.
Yeah,
But that wouldn't change the overall goals of the GSA and their program, I would suggest.
Good point. So one of the things, that also, based on the discussions that Ren had, we want to make sure that we add some language in here to say that we're going to have to coordinate very much, very closely with the watershed plan, and to make sure that the policies and details that are going to be in the program line up with what's in the watershed plan. And then obviously since we don't, as the GSA, we don't have land use authority, we want to be cognizant of the fact that we need to coordinate with the counties as well on the general plans and the county's land use authority as well. So there's still a lot of moving parts that we're going to need to make sure that the details are, coordinate and match up with what else is going on in the area. I'll talk a little bit more about outreach. We still want to make sure that this program has an aggressive outreach program. And then on strategy, I mentioned the fact that from a GSA standpoint, our objective, of course, is to reduce groundwater demand while we're avoiding any undesirable results. But all of those, secondary benefits, including restoration or recreational parks and recreational uses, solar development, all of those types of things, subsidence issues, things of that nature that we can addressed, and those become, important secondary objectives as well. And that the role that we kind of see the GSA is to help, coordinate this plan, at a regional level, to minimize any impacts and make sure that everything is lining up with these other documents that we've talked about. I talked a little bit about the funds available, or the potential funding coming in. It is our intention to certainly, if this AB 252 goes through and passed, they are talking about what they call a multi-benefit land repurposing incentive program act, is the title, I believe. And there's a grant opportunities coming out of that, and that some of the money that we are collecting from the civil penalties might be used as matching funds. So depending on what our requirements might be, depending on what the role exactly is of the GSA in each of these projects, a portion of that matching fund or all that matching fund, it might make sense to have that come out of the GSA. All very project-specific issues. We talked about the fact that we're going to continue to use Basin Safe as our accounting system, and that we do have the ability within Basin Safe to track down to an individual parcel level, which I think making sure that the credits are in place, and that there's a monitoring program in place to monitor. If we say that Project X is going to have a credit, how do we actually monitor that credit and measure that credit? And then the last section I wrote in here is on implementation. It talks a little bit about that, the stakeholders in the area, including public agencies and nonprofit organizations, districts, and individual landowners would all be eligible to participate and identify projects. And then I just gave a list of some of the potential projects that could be coming out of this, in terms of first and foremost, even planning projects. So developing a repurposing overall regional plan to help identify projects that could be funded out of this program. Obviously, restoring habitat, pollinator habitat, floodplain, dryland farming, switching ag to rangeland, recreational areas, even habitat consolidation and connectivity. So this by no means is a exhaustive and complete list, but I threw out some ideas between what we thought might be types of projects that might be funded through this program. And then we talked a little bit about what we thought some of the other measurable benefits might be in terms of improving water supply reliability, protecting water quality, improving flood protection, improving or enhancing wildlife habitat, soil health and carbon storage, and again, recreational opportunity. So we're trying to make the program, at least on this initial cut, broad enough to cover some of the projects that this group may be interested in, and what we think might be covered by any potential land repurposing projects that might come up. So fairly broad brush, I think, for this first cut. And I like I said, if any of you, I want to open it up. I've been doing a lot of talking here. Thoughts, ideas on this as we kind of move forward and we start to put some more meat on the bones?
Can I just look? I don't know what the format is, if I can just interject whenever.
Please, yeah.
No, I just wanted to do on two fronts. one is probably the bigger question, and that's as it pertains to this particular series of efforts, really qualifying what GSA objectives this could prospectively address, right? So much to Mo's initial point, you may not, I mean, you're not going to necessarily see water quantity gains by alternatively, coming up with alternative uses for these sites. However, if you're tactical with how you allocate these sites, you could leverage ancillary benefits, not just from a habitat perspective, but even I mean, just looking at some of the objectives here, even from water quality protection, right? So tactically fallowing areas that are directly contributing to community recharge areas, right? So if communities have zones of accretion within their proximity, those might be high value. They might not change the volume, but reallocating and repurposing sites tactically along those areas might provide ancillary benefit. So same amount of water, different landscape. And then the habitat, I'm an ecologist by trade, so I can make a million arguments as to why there are some habitat opportunities that could be leveraged in this space. But yeah, I think it's really key for the GSA. As I look at this, I'm like, oh, this is an excellent toolbox. And then from the GSA's perspective, I just see this and I'm like, the GSA needs to identify what its objectives are as it looks at this, and then use that as sort of its filtering mechanism to whether it's water quality or flood benefits seem like a prospective value as well.
I think that's a good point. And in this introductory section, I probably need to add a subsection about the objectives for the GSA and what the GSA hopes to accomplish, and expand on that a lot more than what I did on this initial draft of the document. This isn't, like I said, this is very much a working document, but yeah, that's a good point, Ren. I think we'll add some language to that and try to further clarify what the GSA wants to the objectives of the GSA and what the role of the GSA will be in this program. I think that's, like I said, we don't have land use authority. So I want to be clear that we are not telling people how to use their land or dictating to them on how to use their land. This would be strictly a voluntary program, but we were just trying to figure out ways to continue to implement Sigma in a way that also benefits the long-term health of the community. I don't think any of us want to be, driving through here with a bunch of, just nothing but fallow land. If there's something else we can do with that property, we want to be able to encourage that.
Two biggest things for the GSA to do is to assist planning of conveyance. Take hold of opportunities that can come in. Without the conveyance, without the east-west, without all of the things, it's irrelevant. So it's looking at all this land mass for conveyance. The other thing it's going to be critical with your team, all the hydrology, and then any information we can glean off of basin safe for losses, because the biggest recoup of water is going to be reducing losses. So we put in pipelines, line ditches, look at the direction of movement, because losses are so big right now, especially in drought years. You're losing 50% of your surface water, and how much of your groundwater plus evaporation. So when Mo brings up, well, this land costs $1,500 an acre, or we got to use 3 times $4,500, $5,000, $10,000 an acre. What happens if we pinpointed those opportunities or grants to making water and reducing losses and being a lot more efficient, and seeing what those ROIs are? But that's where you, hydrologists, are going to come in with us to work out some of those details. Yeah. So like right now, for example, we we have Angela Water District's hydrologists scoring everywhere to see if there's an area that actually will sink. Because recovery of sinking is better. The other thing I think you can really help on, that's extremely critical, is to either disprove or prove that there's actually a wall underneath the surface that's blocking subbasins and the underground water. Because when you get into marketing and movement of water, is this lake down here blocked here and here? Because I don't think it is.
Yeah.
And then redirecting areas that actually are affecting subsidence worse to where you really got to monitor things versus areas that are not that relevant. Right. So I've got a list of like 20 things. So, and I've sat down with our team and with the guys I work with, and we have actually an action. Because some of the owners that I work with are really adamant about starting to look at pipelines. And if there's a benefit there to show that in a grant, we're going to do it anyway. So, but there's some opportunities there to reduce losses because surface water losses right now are extreme.
Yeah.
They're over half. Over half.
Yeah.
And we have to recover that.
Yeah, that's a lot of water.
And what's the cost of that water?
Right. No, that's a good point, Mark. That's a very good point.
So when Mo has time, he can come in and we'll go through some of those so he can see what we're looking at. Bob are down together. Ken's been with me for a week.
Yeah. Bob will be here next week. We're at the board meeting next week, we'll be presenting.
And I hope I'm here, but I might be in court.
Ah, okay. Other thoughts from anybody regarding the land repurposing? Ren, was there something else you were going to add? I'm sorry, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to tack on again 2 things. I'm coming in waves too. But on the recharge element, I think that's an interesting perspective, especially when you consider it's one of those natural nexuses with prospective flood abatement. So if sites are truly viable for recharge, then immediately we should be considering that multi-benefit avenue, right? So now you can sort of stack benefits like layers of a cake onto that parcel. And then additionally, as we look at this broader list, it's sort of coming up elsewhere already, but ultimately there's going to be water costs associated with prospective fallowing or not having bare dirt, presumably, right? So I guess the data is still out on whether or not it's a true net loss, but if you have vegetation, let's say on a cover crop or on a pollinator habitat on a restoration project, there's, in my opinion, maybe some policy decisions that have to be happening concurrently with any sort of project, right? So like, hey, if you do a project, let's say, and as a result of that project, you have a habitat system or recharge basin that's transpiring, whatever, an extra 0.25 acre feet per year or whatever it is the GSA, is that net water loss going to be eaten by the GSA as a collective? What's the policy that's going to run concurrently with these actions? Because it's inevitably going to be, I mean, it could easily just be a big stop sign, right? So like if it's a punitive action, and so that's a pretty key GSA decision.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, there are a number of other policies that would have to be done concurrent with this or updated at least to whatever this program ends up looking like. That's a good point.
Yeah, for water accounting purposes, it's 2 different levels because Tri-County does calculate their fallow fields a little bit differently. We're not charging our landowners for when they're not having a crop growing, so we're not keeping track of that. But I think Basin State overall does track that, and it likely would be used in overall water balance for the sub-basin. So it does get a little bit tricky, and it would be something we'd have to keep an eye on and consider.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. this gets back to some of the, when we're doing things a little bit differently than folks in the other GSAs, it does.
But that was one of the reasons that we went to the calculation. We did not want to impair land fallowing, or we didn't want to incentivize those who did fallow to go out and disc everything over
Right.
and over to keep the
Right.
evapotranspiration down, because, again, overall, that wasn't the goal of what we wanted to see happen. So, for better or for worse, that's why we're tracking it a little bit differently. It makes the trading more difficult between GSAs because we're not calculating exactly the same way. But I think overall for Tri-County, it still makes sense.
Right. I agree.
Mo, just something to add, you may want to add air quality to your list of benefits as just kind of a
Oh, yeah.
side note. And then I
Yep.
know that Molly had to drop off, but I'm sure she'll have some comments on and thoughts. Is there a deadline you'd like landowners to submit comments on this policy before?
So this is not complete. It is very much, hey, let's start this discussion. So I don't want to put a timeline per se, but it is something that we're going to be talking about in all of our meetings moving forward with this group, and letting the board know what we're, input from this group. So the idea is to have the program flushed out enough that we can, be able to pursue, we have some guidance to pursue these AB 252 money if it becomes available. So there's at least a sense that by the end of the year, we should have some type of program in place, or at least enough of, at least this white paper or this discussion in place and some details, so we can start moving forward with a more detailed plan that actually starts to pick projects and things of that nature. So that was a long answer to your question, Stacey Ann, that we are looking for input continuously from all of you, and we're looking for your thoughts. And like, you mentioned the fact that like things like Fish and Game already has the language. If there's things like that we need to incorporate, I think when, REN and the wildlife or the watershed plan is submitted, we want to be able to make sure that whatever program we have, lines up well with that as well. So this is going to be one of those things I think that is going to evolve and
Stacey, what I would say is, and we're not down to it yet, but we're likely canceling the September 22nd advisory committee meeting. So we will have one in October. But if we could have thoughts and on this particular document that we put out by the September 22nd, then in October we could have that revised and have something a little bit more robust to put out to the group. So
yeah.
I'll put the deadlines on.
I'm not the bad guy.
No, that's helpful. Without a deadline, it tends to fall off my list at least. So that's helpful.
Yeah. Good point.
And we'll put something out. I'll try to have it on the report at the board meeting, and we'll try to put something out, mid-September, just reminding that we'd like to see comments on this document by the September 22nd.
Yeah, items, like the definitions and the overall strategy and things of that nature. I think we're looking forward to getting some input from this group if you agree with that, or if there's things that you guys would like to see changed or modified or added. That's the kind of input we're really looking for, so that we can all agree that, hey, this is going to be our objective and strategy moving forward on this program. So Denise, I should ask, did any thoughts or ideas or suggestions from you? I saw that you joined the call here.
Yeah, we were at a park meeting. They did a dedication at the park today to bring in another group to help with fundraising and doing events in the park. So I was sidetracked by that, but I I looked at the draft repurposing program, and to me, it falls in lines with the discussions that we've had over the past several months. And I'm glad to see it. I heard Deanna mentioned the fact that, you know, the fallow land, that we don't want to go back in and dig it up and, you know, all of that. We want to try to keep it as natural as we possibly can. I mean, that all of the things that I see here are things that we've been talking about. And I mean, I'm saying it on based on my myself, not representing the water district, but I think it's in line with some of the things that we've been talking about. And you know, we're the only populated area in the GSA, and these are the things that we've been talking about. So recharge, how we deal with recycling, bringing in habitat, creating the pollination habitat, all of those things is what we're looking at. And it's supportive of the efforts of climate change. Is where we need to be headed. So I think what is being proposed here is great.
Good, yeah, good. Thank you for adding that. Yeah, appreciate that. Okay, so in the interest of time, because we are at 11:30 here, Mo, is there anything else that you want to add here? Just there's only a few of us on the call, so I figured I'd just go around the room and ask any other thoughts? I trust me, your thoughts on the projects is very much on, you know, in our considerations here.
The only other comment that I have that I think is relevant to this particular conversation is in the document that you guys sent out. There was a conversation about 1 year versus a 5-year allocation, and you guys wanted input from the landowners. And I still stand by my I guess, desire to have a 5-year allocation for to be able to calculate an investment horizon. So if you're trying to, you know, do projects that are millions of dollars and you're looking for an ROI, a 1-year look is just not enough. So a 5-year allocation, a stair step, I still think would be a better idea.
Okay, Angela Water District agrees with Mom. That's
the way it's currently written.
Yeah.
We just wanted to at least throw that out there as if that was going to be an issue.
we don't want to move from an annual plan.
Okay, good. That's
Good, fine with me?
yeah. That's the kind of input we were seeking. Absolutely. I like the emphatic decision there, Mo. Okay. So let me mention a couple of quick things, and then I'll wrap it up for the group and let you get back to your day jobs. We are, as some of you know, as well, Mo well knows, working with the McMullen area GSA on a water market study. I just want to point out to you guys that we have submitted our final draft to them, and it's it's being reviewed as we speak. They have a board meeting on September 2nd. In which we will be presenting our findings and our recommendations to their board, and then we'll be finalizing that document. And my understanding is, at least, that their board will be making that document publicly available to everyone. So, just want to let you know that water market study is out there. And then I'll remind everybody that we've got our board meeting is on September 2nd for Tri-County, and that's at 1 o'clock. Stacy, yes, I probably should have mentioned that. It's 1 o'clock, and we're doing it in person and via Zoom.
Correct.
So we hope to see some of you at least here in Corcoran. And then, as Deanna mentioned, we do have an advisory committee meeting on September 22nd. We are thinking about canceling that, but Deanna and Stacy will let you know. And Stacy, do you have the date of the October meeting handy by any chance?
I do not.
Okay.
I don't have my.
It'd be the fourth Wednesday, I like it up
Yeah.
right.
Should have written that on here.
October 27th.
Okay, October 27th. So if we don't meet in September, then we will see you all in October. And that's it for today. Thank you all, appreciate your
Take care,
time. and-
everybody.
Yeah, bye, see you later. Take care, stay safe.